The squirrel was magic!
You're live.
Okay.
The music wasn't playing for some reason.
Oh, okay. Beware your human heart. This is a Diabolical Index for March 5th, where the pages of the uncanny reside. I'm coming to you live from Rising Sun, Indiana, Paradox City Books and Games. And I'm pleased to announce that I'm finally part of the Magic Scroll Network family. They gave me Herculobulus, Hercolubus, something, or the Red Planet. You may not know what that means, but it means a lot to the Pointless Discussion guys, and it has a lot to do with astral transcendence and improv comedy. I don't know. I have no idea what it's all about. There's some sort of crimson planet that's coming down to destroy Earth, and has something to do with spiritual transcendence. But want to get the cam on that one?
Yeah. Sorry. There you go. Go that way. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, some technical difficulties. I'm having to use some notes tonight. I'm a little out of it, but that's all right, because all I care about is that we had the maiden voyage of the Animonkai podcast last night, and it was awesome. It's the network's newest anime, manga, and kaiju-based podcast. So that's where I was given my personal copy of the Red Planet, Herculobus. I'm going to say it right one of these days. At least I don't have to say that one name of that one character from the Choose Your Own Adventure the other day. Decent Mix of Mimus, or something like that. But yeah, has a lot to do with me being on Pointless Discussions this Thursday at 10 p.m. I have no idea what I'm getting into, but definitely tune in to check that out and see what they have in store for me there. And also, while you're checking out Pointless Discussions on MagicScrollNetwork.com, make sure to go to their GoFundMe page to help them get the new theme song done by Royish Good Looks while you're there, to help them out with that. It's always appreciated. And let's see here. Yeah, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Cinematic reality is coming to fruition, and you can do your part to help them out at Studio 605 and the original kings of Ohio County indie horror, as well as Brandon Pruitt, the host of the upcoming completely positive, no, that's not true at all, movie review podcast called Previews. He puts the gat in negativity, but he's going to be the director on that one, and it ought to be cool. So make sure to go to their Indiegogo. It's branched off of TJ's, the infamous TJ's, Heckles and Horror podcast link on there, and go to their Indiegogo and help them out. And there's some nice perks in it. Apparently, you can go on a date with most of the Studio 605 guys, and been there, done that. I've got tattoos. No, I don't have tattoos, but I do have scars, and they're mostly psychological. So make sure to check that out and help them out too. Okay, so now that stuff is out of the way, there are a couple of pretty notable births and deaths from this week in literary history. The birth for the week is Bret Easton Ellis. He's the author of Less Than Zero, which I always thought was probably one of the best captured high school. I guess you call it like an '80s glam. I don't know. It's a real. It encompasses. It really personifies the '80s for me, with the presentation of what it's like to be in high school and then beyond, and the pitfalls that have to do with friends, and how sometimes the ties that bind can end up being a knife in the back. So that's a great one. And then the follow up. And actually, I believe it was a follow up. It was definitely a follow up chronologically. Fictionally, but I don't know which one came first, to be honest. But the Rules of Attraction, both of those have become movies, and the Rules of Attraction was also excellent. I read it when I was in college, and it was probably the best representation of collegiate life that I could possibly have asked for. And it's they're all written in this real choppy staccato, almost a stream of consciousness framework to put the ideas across, but there's no stream of consciousness that even compares to probably his most famous novel, which is American Psycho. The infamous novel became a Christian Bale vehicle, and there's no doubt about it that that book tore me up when I read that. I read it in college, and I probably read it in like 6 hours. It was a quick read because it's such a frenetic, dense, just collection of thoughts from this absolute psychopath. And once I was done, I was so rattled that I actually had to go do something cheerful, which is unusual for me. Usually I can take that stuff pretty well, but that wrecked me. So moving on to the death in literary history, Ayn Rand, the author of We the Living and Atlas Shrugged, and probably I don't know which one would be her most famous, because it seems like she didn't do much fictional stuff, but the stuff that she did, it was all provocative and controversial. Atlas Shrugged, the Fountainhead. My favorite of hers is probably Anthem, which is a very small dystopian book, and I think that sometimes it gets overlooked. It was actually recommended to me. I don't know, probably something like 20 years ago or something like that. And it's a dystopia where everyone refers to each other as I think it was, there was no I, so you call yourself we or they, which I.
Collective, or
What's that now?
is it like a collective?
No, it's not like a hive mind or anything like that. Well, I mean, I guess you might be right, but when I think of collective, I think of people who do it of their own accord, and this is something you're born into, where it's probably there are probably all sorts of analyses of the book that would maybe point towards I don't know, a kind of an amplified communism, but I don't know about any of that stuff. I'm not a political animal, but political is definitely what she was in her philosophy. She was the founder of objectivism, which is basically distilled down into just a couple of words. Is basically, the object of existence is to live. So, self-esteem and just kind of I don't know, I guess you could kind of say it was kind of a selfish philosophy, but it just had to do with the self and ambition and things like that, which obviously I have a bookstore in the 21st century, so I must not be that ambitious. But anyway, that's the births and deaths in literary history. So we'll move on to talking about the books for tonight, for the Diabolical Index entry number 3, but 5th episode. So it's pretty wild that it's already been a little over a month since we started this whole thing, and now there's a brand new podcast coming this week, hopefully, and it's been an experience, and I don't know, it started a lot of things. A lot of people have contacted me from the past, and I've made a lot of new friends due to it, just in the month and a half, or the month and a week that it's been going on. So it's been great. But the basically I don't know if you call it a theme, but basically a thread that was going through these things. The second one isn't a book on its own; it's actually a story, and I have mentioned it on my promo yesterday from the Anamonkai podcast. But the first book is The Boy Who Drew Monsters by Keith Donohue. Donohue. Sorry about that. I didn't want to say Donahoe. Makes it sound like Hawaiian or something. But basically, the second work is a short story that should be known to all of you, and if it isn't, it's a great disservice. It's W.W. Jacobs's The Monkey's Paw, which, in my opinion, is one of the great short stories of all time. M. Night Shyamalan wishes he could come up with a story like this one, just due to it's so twisty and turvy. But I mean, it's not unbelievable, because both of these books kind of it's definitely a contrast this time, but there are similarities between the kind of like the drive and the thrust of the story, because on one hand you kind of have the perception versus reality question, where, you know, we use our eyes and our ears and our other senses, but they can be, you know, they can be deceiving. They can fool us. A lot of people say, you know, I must have been seeing things, must have been hearing things. When I was a kid, I didn't really believe that. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with that. I experienced a really intense fever when I was a kid that kind of, I almost said allowed me to have hallucinations, but kind of put me in a hallucinatory state, because I guess that my brain was of a higher temperature than it's supposed to be. But even then, I knew right from wrong, and what was there in front of me and what wasn't. But I think as I'm getting older, I have started to see things out of the corner of my eye, which kind of links these two things together in a slight way. But on the other hand, they're also both stories in one way or another about how what we want could possibly be what scares us, and beware of what you wish for. So there are desires and there are wants and needs that a lot of times as children no one even think to contemplate, and as adults we couldn't even explain. So the first one, The Boy Who Drew Monsters, I'm going to show this over here. It's a wonderful cover. It's a really stark contrast between the lettering and the background, and it's almost spectral, maybe even electric, and it shows a kind of like a casting of light off the water. And strangely enough, when I was reading it, I realized that it's kind of a supernatural horror story, thriller, psychologically charged family drama, which, if you think about it, since it's set in Maine, and there's also it's on the water, there's a peninsula where the father, Tim, he has to take care of kind of like derelict buildings just due to vacationers or timeshares. So there are these large buildings of the rich and kind of like abodes of people who are above, his standing, that are just sitting there, derelict and vacant. It's like tombstones, like across the peninsula. And he can go in and kind of visit their lives and see these empty places and kind of root through the secrets and the unsaid things of these families that have somewhere better to be at the time. And it kind of takes him away from the conflicts in his own life that had been started when his son, John Peter, ends up nearly drowning in the ocean outside of the peninsula. And if I didn't mention it, it's in Maine. So if you think about a horror story set in Maine, I mean, it's easy to make assumptions as to who you would normally think of in that respect, which would be Stephen King. And it's funny, though, because one thing that I noticed with this story is that it keeps coming back to the symbolic and actual power and deadly force, and sometimes mysterious depths of water. I know that I was talking about Shyamalan earlier, and he's obsessed with the uses of water in stories. But in this case, it's a little more palpable, especially when you think about the kind of like the transitory medium of water. There are a lot of resurrection stories. There are baptismal stories where things pass through water and are changed when they come through the other side. I guess a good example would be Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th films, where he gets betrayed and then he dies and goes to the bottom of Crystal Lake, and that ends up kind of being where he resides. That's his resting place until he's born again multiple times, to wreak havoc at Camp Blood. And also in Constantine, the movie Constantine, when Keanu Reeves wants to take a slight jaunt into hell, he ends up putting his bare feet into a bowl of water. So in mythology, water has been seen as the great boundary line. Like underneath, there's an underworld. It wouldn't be subterranean, but there would be depths that might figure to be another plane, even of existence, where you could travel just by passing through water. And The Fog, the movie The Fog, where the pirates seeking revenge come out of the fog and the waters to find their booty and things that are owed to them. And there's also the idea of scrying, where you look at the reflections off the water, just like on the cover of the book, and you can see the future. But with this story, John Peter, JP, or Jip, they call him Jip, he kind of gives the idea of they don't, as far as I know, they don't mention it in the book, and I kind of applaud him for that. It seems like there's a prevalence in current media to use autism as some sort of magical state of being, and it causes it's problematic for people, and sometimes it can be traumatic, but it's also a way of life. It's a part of people, and in the form of Asperger's and autism, sometimes they can see it as a heightened awareness, which isn't, that's definitely true, but sometimes it can also be a harrowing experience for the people who have to go through it. So luckily in this case, it seems like just the circumstances and the personality of the child, and it is most definitely a child. That's the lead character in the book, and his thoughts and dreams and mostly nightmares and recollections of almost drowning at sea, and the things that he brought back with him, and actually the things that he creates, as in the title of the book, the titular boy who drew monsters. And he draws these monsters, and I guess there could be a double meaning there, where he draws them, just as simple as that. He uses his artistic talent, which is newborn. They didn't even know that he had it before, and it may be because he's kind of like looking through the window of the paper to draw things that he sees in his mind. So that makes it a little bit easier. But on the other hand, it could be that he's drawing them out from their resting places, because they're surrounded by water, the place where he must have met them, almost on the other side of his life, and also from the hidden places in the dark hills of the peninsula. So he actually has a friend, Nick. It's his only remaining friend, because he most definitely has some post-traumatic stress due to the drowning. So due to that, he won't even allow his own mother, Holly, to even touch him without lashing out and beating her just mercilessly through this fog of just terror. But at the same time, he's asking for the monsters to show themselves through these pictures, and his friend Nick, who just in the childlike way secret ways, kind of almost like a pirate's way, where you send coded messages. Jip finds a message that says simply "draw more monsters," and I don't know if it's a mischievous thing on the part of Nick, wanting to see how far he can take it, and see what Jip can bring out of the darkness to keep him company. But it's a terrifying story, mostly from the sense of I'm a new parent myself, so I can imagine what it would be like to not even be able to touch, to embrace your child without them lashing out, just due to sheer terror, due to not knowing what might be closing their arms around them. But at the same time, he's bringing them out. He's maybe even creating them out of his own memory, and the post-traumatic stress that nearly drowning, almost cost him his life, and maybe gave him a glimpse into something on the other side that he can't get away from, but at the same time he can't do without. So it's a really complex story, but I think that's what sort of links it. I don't want to say much more about it, because it's a very engaging story, and I think to analyze it too much without kind of like seeing it through the veil of your own experience by reading the book, I think that it would cheapen the impact and the effect. But kind of not knowing that what you want could actually hurt you or even kill you, I think that that's the point, and that's what kind of led me to connect this book, The Boy Who Drew Monsters, to the story in the Big Book of Ghost Stories, W.W. Jacobs's The Monkey's Paw. You want to see this here? It's a dense collection, and it's fantastic because most of the stories in there are from easily 50 years ago, even 100 years ago. I think there's some Rudyard Kipling in here, and of course one of my big favorites, Isaac Asimov, Oscar Wilde, and a lot of British authors. I believe that H.P. Lovecraft might have snuck in here somewhere too. But basically, with W.W. Jacobs and The Monkey's Paw, it's a story that has been examined many times in many different forms. Actually, in one way, it was examined in a Tales from the Crypt movie that I can't remember if it was Tales from the Crypt or Vault of Horror, but I think it was Tales from the Crypt movie that came out in the 70s, strangely enough, from Amicus. It was a British production company, and which is totally strange, because I don't think that anything could be more quintessentially American than Tales from the Crypt and the EC horror comics of that era, during the Comics Code Authority crackdown and seduction of the innocent kind of blacklisting and the witch hunts that happened during that time. But they revisit it, except they changed the story slightly. I guess that with The Monkey's Paw, it might be one of those things where it's like an urban legend. It passes from one person to another, and they kind of code it with their experience, and then it gets whittled away with each telling. But like I said during the Anamonkai promo, I'd actually read this story to Melanie and Lucy one night, once I got the book and started reading through the stories to see if there was any that kind of like resonated with The Boy Who Drew Monsters. And it was funny because Lucy, out of the two, I thought she was going to be completely terrified about the notion, but it ended up being Melanie, the older of the two, that they were really latched on, and it kind of freaked her out. Even with a lot of the language is kind of antiquated, and kind of the relationship between man and wife, it's kind of outdated. But the story remains the same, and the impact of be careful what you wish for definitely comes through. I don't know if anyone's read that. I would imagine that most of you at least heard the story in one way or another. but it's about man and wife, and they receive a visitor who's an old craggy sea. I believe he's a sea captain, or he was a general, and he was some sort of soldier or military officer, and he is war weary, world weary, and he's seen it all and done it all. But what he can't quite explain, and what it seems like he begrudgingly wants to get rid of, is this little trinket, almost like a talisman from across the sea, and it's just a small, crumpled, grizzled little mummified monkey's paw. And he said that he got it. Yeah, he kind of alludes to having maybe won it, or got it in some game of chance, and whatever it is, he's not too happy to have had it, and he's seen some things through transferring it to his hands that he's not. I guess he doesn't want to do the husband a disservice, but he is more than happy to allow this person to fall into a trap in order to get it off of his hands, and whatever blood or history or betrayal, is all over them due to the monkey's paw. But basically, the story is that you can make 3 wishes on it, and the wishes will come true, according to the hocus pocus and heebie-jeebies that the military officer ascribes to it, and the person that he got it from must have. But there's a knowing wink in his eye that tells them that there might be something to it. So they, as you're wont to do, you look at the thing and it kind of like sticks out on the table, and they kind of avoid it for a little while, and their son, who's been visiting, gets called away, and the wife asks for lots of money to be rich, and all of a sudden they receive word that their son was killed in an accident, and they stand to become rich due to the insurance money on his upon his death. So they know that what they wanted ended up causing the demise of their dearest born. So it goes on from there. I'm kind of hesitant to tell the whole story because it's great, but basically you have to be careful of what you wish for, and a lot of times the devil can give you what you want, but it's not always in the way that you think, and it ends up being more trouble than it's worth, and it might even cost you your soul. But with the whole the water element and seeing things out of the corner of your eye, I forgot to mention something about the boy who drew monsters. There are monsters on this peninsula, but they're only seen out of the corner of the father's eye. He's driving Nick home from a visit because Jip has lost all of his friends due to not being able to not have these attacks, and I mean I hesitate to say seizure, but these outbursts that make it difficult for kids to get along, because if they bump into each other in a game of touch football, then he'll end up beating them to a pulp. But when he was bringing Nick home one night, the father looks over one of the hills and he sees this kind of amorphous blob kind of sprout legs and start scuttling across the hill, and he doesn't see it directly full on, so it's one of those things where he kind of pulls a Ebenezer Scrooge line out of his hat and says to himself, maybe it was just something I ate. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's too late, and dealing with Jip and his terrors and going back in the dark. Maybe I'm seeing things. Maybe it wasn't really there, or maybe it was in the back of my head somewhere. But at the same time, he almost becomes obsessed with the idea. So he ends up wandering the dunes and wandering the hills and secret places on the peninsula, trying to see whether or not he's actually seeing what he saw, or if it's some sort of crazy hobgoblin in the back of his mind somewhere. which reminded me as I was reading it of something that actually happened to me one time. And I I ended up calling into a radio show. Actually, there's a radio show, Coast to Coast AM, and I used to deliver pharmaceuticals out of a warehouse, independent contractor for old folks' homes late at night, really late at night. So I'd be driving out in the middle of nowhere. You know, you're doing these deliveries and you get paid by the mile. So you want to go out as far afield as you possibly can, and sometimes you end up in the middle of nowhere. And that's exactly where I was. And I'm not exactly sure what kind of field that the road cut through, but it seemed like I was driving on it forever. And there were just waving fields of some kind of plant. I'm not sure if I know it wasn't corn, but you know, I've mentioned to many people, and some people said it could have been soybeans. But I'll be honest, even though I live in Rising Sun, I wouldn't know a soybean if I was wiping my ass with one. But it's just okay. So there you go. I mean, that can't be right. So whatever it was probably taller than a man. Whatever it was out there. But that's where it gets interesting, because past it you could see a farmhouse like way off in the distance somewhere, and the only thing that was lighting the way, really, I didn't have a whole lot in the way of headlights for some reason. That car, it was a car that I had beaten up time and time again to do that delivery job, and my lights were really dim, and there weren't any street lights because it was just kind of like a farm road. And so I've noticed that they tend to try to hide old folks' homes, so people aren't constantly looking at them and making themselves aware of what's to come. You know, the decrepitude of old age in some areas. But I'm driving through these long grasses or weeds or something, whatever it was, and all of a sudden, you know, it's cold and the moon is kind of like lighting the way and stuff, and I'm really cognizant of trying to not hit a deer. Like if a deer were to walk out in front of through the grasses or whatever it was, walk out in front of me, I wanted to be ready because I wasn't so sure that the light would point him out to me before I hit him. So a little bit farther away, probably, I don't know, if I had to guess, I'd say something like 100 yards away, I see something kind of poking out through the grass. I'm going to call it grass, is all I can say, but it was definitely taller than a man. And something pokes out, so I slow down. And I see it start to walk out on four legs, so I'm like, well, this is that deer I was looking for. And then as I'm getting closer to it, it stands up on two legs. And this is probably something like 3 or 4 in the morning. We were always trying to get, 3.5 hour one-way trips. So we ended up spending our whole 8-hour shift for up and back, and we get paid for the mileage. So I can't say that I wasn't tired. I was definitely tired. But I think I would know the difference between, just some kind of, I don't know, some kind of thing that I would guess is something else, just from a flicker of the moonlight or my own headlights, or just my own fatigue of driving all night. But it stood up, and something I can't even explain that, but one thing that I definitely can't explain is that when I was coming up on it, it was like this white flapping motion where its head should have been. And it scared the living shit out of me. There's no doubt about it. I did not slow down. I did not try to see what it was, and I didn't look in my rearview mirror. I just hit the gas and kept going. I've had a lot of theories of what it was. 4 in the morning, it was walking on all fours. It was brown in color, and then all of a sudden it stood up. In hindsight, I was thinking, well, maybe there's some guy, who was drunk on a whatever night that was, and then he ends up stumbling out into the field, and he's just stuck there. And he was, he might have had like a white t-shirt or something. He was just trying to flag me down with it. But I don't know. I've never been sure, and I'll never find out because I didn't stick around to find out what it was. And in my imaginings, I've thought, maybe it was some kind of Bigfoot monster that had a bird in its mouth that was trying to eat, and the bird was flapping around. Whatever it was, it's one of those stories that is just too weird, even for me, to have made up. But I can see where the character in The Boy Who Drew Monsters is coming from, because sometimes you're not quite sure that you were seeing things, and you're not quite sure that something might not be out there, especially if your son keeps going on about the monsters that followed him out from the ocean. You might be interested to see what it was, especially if it isn't a human agency. You may want to try to see what the milky white fish-bellied creature that just crawled past your car might have been, so it doesn't end up scratching at your windows at night or anything like that. So there you go. Wonderful books. There's wonderful stories in this book, the Big Book of Ghost Stories, and I didn't even scratch the surface. That's only one of the many stories that are in there, and I probably won't even get through all of them before I take it back to the library. So the library has been a great help to me during these podcasts. They supplied me with a lot of books that might have been difficult to find otherwise. Like one I was thinking of actually, while I was reading The Boy Who Drew Monsters, there was one I thought of that is difficult to find. I used to have a copy of it a long time ago, but having the bookstore, it probably slipped through the cracks. I ended up accidentally selling it, and whoever made off with it ended up having a gem, because it's one of those critically acclaimed yet little known horror authors that kind of transcend genre, kind of like Clive Barker. Cathay, I hope I'm saying it right. It's Kathe Koja. I always have said Cathay Koya. That's what I've always said. It might be Koja, I'm not sure. But she's written a lot of books. She had a big explosion in the 90s on a Dell imprint called The Abyss book line. And it was kind of a line where it was horror that skirted the edge of there was a lot of sadomasochistic themes, and just kind of like cyberpunk themes, and different things that kind of skirted the edge of horror, and sometimes went into like science fiction areas and different things. But she wrote one called Bad Brains, which is about a guy, and it reminded me a whole lot of this, because instead of a child, you have a man, and I believe he's kind of in the throes of alcoholism, where his normal perception is altered due to being inebriated most of the time. But he ends up being in an altercation in a parking lot where he's actually ridiculing someone, and for his trouble, he ends up, I think he just trips or something, or like somebody backs out and he's trying to avoid them on foot, and he ends up cracking his head. He ends up in the hospital, but ever since he wakes up in the hospital, I think he might have been in a minor coma, he kind of has the idea that the coma brought something back, because just out of his sight and in his eye line, he sees this silvery, snotty, that's not mine. He describes it as a mucousy, membranous serpent that just kind of like slithers up the wall and out behind a picture and over a door, like just out of his sight, in his periphery, and it just drives him crazy. It's a paranoia that ensues, because he starts to not know what's real anymore, because he sees this creature without an eye, or without a body. But for some reason, he might think that it has a mouth, and it might be coming to take some lifeblood, or maybe even a soul, or his brains. And that's kind of where the bad brains comes from. He doesn't know if there are worms just slithering around his brain ever since the accident. And this really reminded me of it, because there's trauma, there's an experience you can't explain. There's, with this child, Jip, I mean, he basically, he's cut off from the world. So that kind of, falls in line with, I think his name is August. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, in Bad Brains, I mean. And he's in a coma, so he's cut off as well. And they both came back from the brink of consciousness with something they had brought with them. And that they don't necessarily want, but they're obsessed to find out whether or not they have, which can also be bad. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out for those. If you can find, The Boy Who Drew Monsters practically anywhere. It's pretty new. It came out from the author of The Stolen Child. His name is Keith Donohue. And The Big Book of Ghost Stories, I think that it's a Black Lizard. Yeah, it's a Black Lizard publication. And I can totally recommend finding any Black Lizard imprinted book that you can find. And they're all wonderful. They tend to do a lot of old school noir type crime stories. A lot of Jim Thompson, like The Grifters, and Raymond Chandler's. Is that Sam Spade? Sam Spade. I'm sorry. Philip Marlowe. Raymond Chandler is Philip Marlowe. Sam Spade is Dashiell Hammett of the Maltese Falcon. But anytime you see a Black Lizard imprinted book, you should totally buy it. It's wonderful. I never had one that's let me down. Chester Himes, they put out the Real Cool Killers. It was a very early black experience-based crime novel from the ghettos and things like that. So check that out. But definitely, if you can find Cathay Koya book, any one of them. In fact, she wrote Skin. Skin was actually the first book of hers that I read, and it was kind of a time. As you can tell by my pallor, I'm not much of a beachcomber. I had gone on vacation with my family, and we went to St. Augustine by the forts to stay with some family. And, of course, just like you think, there's paradise, there's the ocean and sand and beautiful vistas. So, of course, I'm looking for a bookstore, right? And I just find this little rinky-dink bookstore, but it was fantastic. And I ended up seeing this really interesting cover of a book called Skin by Cathay Koya. And you look at the cover, and the cover is kind of like a reverse negative of a fingerprint. And when you get into that one, I won't even go into that one, but there's a whole psychosexual performance art equals, pain equals art, and different things, kind of like a transcendent vision of what it's like to kind of like thrust your body into the void and come back with, I don't know, heightened understanding of what it's like to feel. But that's a fantastic one. Although I tried to read it not too long ago, and it's one of those things where it's so 90s. It's so 90s that it's difficult to embrace it. It's of a time, so it's difficult to embrace that one. But Bad Brains is fantastic, and actually, those two, in my opinion, aren't even her best work. I think that her best work, and it's an absolute terrifying shame that it hasn't become a movie yet, especially now. I mean, congratulations, Guillermo del Toro. I think Best Director and Best Picture for Shape of Water, right? I have to say that now's the time, because The Cipher is a book, and I think it may have been her first published book. I'm not quite sure about that. But The Cipher is far and away one of the most interesting, unusual, and unique horror books I'd ever read in my life. And basically it's one of those really simple ideas that you don't think could come off, and somehow it totally does. But it takes place in an urban setting, and it's just within the confines of an apartment building. And there's kind of like there's a strained relationship between two roommates, and I think it kind of, with the roommates, it fluctuates between girlfriend and then to flatmate, sort of, and then it's almost like to annoyance almost, and then back again to the relationship. These people can't seem to get along, but they can't seem to get away from each other either. But I think in something as totally mundane as a washroom, where someone's about to do laundry or something, the girl finds a hole in the floor, and it's not a hole that's been cut by a saw or a drill or or the rotting linoleum. It's a hole that she says is organically there, almost like a pore in your skin, or like an orifice, like your mouth or your ear hole. And she becomes obsessed with it because she's seen things fall into it, and when they come back out again, or she's actually plucked them out, they're different somehow. And she ends up spending time in the washroom, and she becomes so obsessed that she just stays in there all the time, because there's like a strange, almost like a radioactivity that comes off of it that stimulates her libido and stimulates her thoughts, and there's almost like a hallucinatory haze that she's in when she's there, like an endorphin rush. And the man becomes involved in the entire apartment building, and I think, if I remember correctly, she wants to see what it does to like a human piece of flesh. So I'm just gonna leave that right there. But look out for the cipher. Totally fantastic. But it just seems like now is the time for a story like that, and it doesn't suffer so much from the I don't know, the 90s lag that Skin does. Although if you were going to do, I mean, I guess it's totally possible, and it would probably benefit the production if you actually did Skin as a 90s period film and see if you can't capture it, because I mean it's meant to be there and it resides there. But the strangest part of all is that kind of like Clive Barker went almost into exile for a minute. I'm not so sure he was doing well health-wise for a while, and he ended up kind of getting out of the limelight, and so did she. She was kind of at the forefront of these things, and then she kind of backed off, and as far as I know, I think she did some children's books for a while, which I think that, rather than overstaying your welcome in a genre, I think that it's great to kind of branch out and do other things. So, yeah, check her out. Check out Keith Donohue, and go back in time. Look at the big book of ghost stories for things from the past, and you'll definitely find a lot of stuff in here that'll pique your interest and give you the heebie-jeebies and the shakes and all that stuff deep into the night, even though it's been it was written before the advent of the combustion engine a lot of times, but that's cool. But anyway, that's what I had to offer tonight, the Diabolical Index. It was a little scattered. It was kind of, there was a family of things I want to talk about rather than just two, so that's all right, though. It touched on a bunch of stuff. But, while I'm here, I don't want to pass over the fact that, we got a new podcast coming up this week. Most likely Wednesday. No promises, but the Animonkai Anime Manga Kaiju podcast with Mark Planup and Andrew Sefton is coming your way. They did a great job. I thought that they really fell into their own experience with that, and they really took off. And make sure that you don't forget Heckles and Horror will be coming at you Wednesday at 10 p.m. rather than tomorrow night. TJ will be missed tomorrow night, but we have lives. So he had to, he was interested in something, he went after it, which is how people make podcasts, in my opinion. So there you go. But through Heckles and Horror link, make sure that you go to the Cinematic Reality Indiegogo page and help them out with that. I've been talking about it a lot. Can't really talk about it enough, because there can't be enough creativity. So if you can help them make that, especially since Studio 605, I think they're in need of a good thriller. They've been going after the horror and stuff so hard at it that I think it's really interesting. They want to stretch their legs with more of a conventional take on on the thriller and the terror of kind of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, check it out. Definitely go there and help them out. Anything you can do. There are all kinds of perks. I think that there's a perk for something like thumb drive or what's that? Flash drive fun. Flash drive fun. So you'll be able to get all kinds of exclusive behind the scenes photographs and maybe even some video, I think, like behind the scenes stuff that they'll give to you on a flash drive. And of course, the ever popular date with 605, so you can go out with the boys and see what kind of devilry they get into. I've seen it firsthand, and I tell you, you'll never be the same. So definitely throw some coins at them. And speaking of coin, definitely go to the GoFundMe for Pointless Discussions. My boys, I'm going to be able to see them on Thursday. I'll be going to the Nut House, and who knows what rigors they're going to put me through. Apparently, they're going to be wanting to talk about me, which is always terrifying to speak of. Because, I mean, I don't know. How do you talk about yourself? How do you remember everything? I don't know. I might have to make notes on that one too, like I did tonight. But at least I didn't have to refer them the whole time. I just had to kind of get started and get on a roll. But definitely go to their GoFundMe for the new theme song from the Royish Good Looks. I went to his YouTube, and he does some interesting things with auto-tune and kind of like mashups of classic and more modern shows and different things like that. So it should be interesting to say the least. I'm actually kind of curious as to whether or not he's going to use sound bites from their podcast to make it up. I'd be surprised if he didn't. So that should be really interesting to maybe try to pick those out. And yeah, check out Paradox City Books and Games on Facebook. I'm still down here. I had a really good weekend. I met a lot of great people. I actually had a couple of good friends come in from out of town. Shout out to Andrea and the Stone family. Got to meet her husband and his sister, and that was a blast. And actually the Archer family, which is always it's always a pleasure to see them down here. Minus one, Veronica had to be at work, which always sucks. But yeah, it was great to have them down here as always, and it actually gave me a drive to kind of get some things out of the way and clean up around here a little bit, and it made it a little bit easier to set up for the Diabolical Index tonight. So that's always good. And I was able to find some books that I was looking for, and that might end up showing up in further things. So make sure to check out our videos on YouTube. Actually, let me get out the list. It's a little bit easier. There are a lot of these now, which is good. It's not bad. It's a good thing, but sometimes they don't all come to mind. What's that now?
Most of it's on the Magic.
Yes, absolutely. MagicSquirrelNetwork.com has all this stuff, but just for your information, we're on Facebook Live, of course. You're probably watching it now. Twitch and Mixer, as well as YouTube, and it's almost does it go over to YouTube immediately?
Yeah, you're on YouTube right now.
Yeah, so there you go. It's that I thought that there was there was some kind of. Yeah, I thought there was some kind of transmission time lag or something like that. But also the audio is on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, which is, I think Stitcher is one of my favorites. I find a lot of great podcasts there, and Google Play Music. So, yeah, actually I can put a shout out, and not like I know these guys or anything, but definitely check out Horror Business podcast. I'm looking to become a patron of them. They really remind me of me and a lot of conversations I have about horror and different things, and they know their stuff. They're a really great mix of experience and information and humor. They're and sass. Oh my God, they're sassy. But they know what they're talking about.
You know where they're out of?
Definitely New York, I believe. But I think that I think a lot of them have to do with different musical scenes down there. Oh, but also I think it's kind of an offshoot of Cinepunks. I think it's with an X. And yeah, these guys, they got some serious knowledge about movies and stuff. Whereas Horror Business, I think, is kind of like the horror arm of their expertise, and then they have the Cinepunks website and stuff. So I don't know. Shout out, maybe. You never know. it's kind of it's a weird, I'm always saying like rarefied atmosphere with a podcast and stuff. You never know if people are gonna intermingle. I mean, ever since I started this thing, I'm gonna be on discussions this week, and I've talked to a couple of guys in Northern Indiana that maybe want to have me out and stuff, and maybe I can shoot some knowledge of the other squirrel heads. I don't know. I've been putting squirrel on everything lately. I'm trying to start a thing. I'm not sure, But yeah, hashtag squirrel heads. Keep it squirrely. I almost forgot that last night. Was that Mark on that one? Was that his baby? I think that might have been Mark that threw the keep it squirrely out there. Because, I was going for something else, and he said that, and I was like, we're redoing the whole thing because we got to get that going. That's going to be on the back of a t-shirt like any day now. Speaking of t-shirts, the 16th, March 16th, is when my stickers should be printing up for Diabolical Index stickers. I'm all about the stickers. Oh, actually, I got all kinds of homemade stickers and stuff for the shop. You got on Bookcam? So this might be some swagalicious stuff that we put out for different things, read books or else, of course, always. And let's see here. Maybe I can show them like that. Puzzling People Since a Month From Now. I just got those put out. And the ever popular, let me see if I can find the ever popular Books Make Up for Looks. One of my favorites. And I think it's absolutely true. So, yeah, but hopefully the t-shirts are coming. And stickers and everything else. But the Diabolical Index sticker will be emblazoned with the Magic Squirrel network plug at the bottom of that. So that'll be cool. So I look to see these stickers and all that stuff on everybody's cars. Maybe we can get some kind of like real toothy, open mouth, pointless discussions. I think you could almost do that without the pointless discussions logo. It'd probably just be the open mouth on there, and then that would say it all. We need a squirrel mobile. So anyone who wants to donate some old beater, I mean, just put a gigantic furry tail on the back of it with a witch's hat.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, we could like.
Looking like the thing from Dumb and Dumber.
Cause yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. We could totally use Dumb and Dumber as the inspiration for that, especially since I can foresee us going around to different things pretty soon. We're gaining a lot of momentum, and there's a lot of different content coming up, and hopefully more to come. Late night crafts with Mary. I know that was a big hit. I was a gigantic fan of that. I was all about it, and especially like the time slot. It was like 4:30 in the morning. I was like, yes, something woke me up, and I was like looking for something to do to kind of lull me back to sleep, and of course I wasn't, because I was like, oh man, look what she's making with like bowls and cans and all this stuff, and it just turned out fantastically. And totally modest as always, she's just like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, it's totally easy to do. I'm like, whatever. And Jack was saying like it does look three-dimensional. Was he being for real when he said about those look flat, or those don't look flat or anything like that? Yeah, I'm not sure. You never really tell with him. He's a mysterious guy. Yeah. He's always got a look on his face like he's not sure if he wants to hug you or rip your arms off. Which I guess, that's endearing. It's a charming thing. But anyway, I think that about wraps it up, don't you? Is there anything else I need to put out there? Oh, yeah, Pointless Discussions visit Thursday at 10 o'clock. The infamous TJ, Wednesday this week for Heckles and Horror at 10 p.m. also. And then, what is it, Late Night Rager, Neo Rage, on Friday night?
Yeah, 11, I think.
11? So, do you know what game's coming up this weekend?
I do not.
For him?
I don't.
I'm interested.
He's trying to beat Final Fantasy 3, I think he's trying to beat it.
Okay, awesome. So, I like the old school, kind of going back to that stuff. Do you know if he might get into kind of like the midway, like the mid-range, like Metal Gear from way back in the day with all the stealthy stuff?
Yeah, I'm trying to, just whatever he hasn't beat yet, I think he's trying to go for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was watching some article where, this new Metal Gear doesn't have any kind of stealth in it whatsoever.
That Survive or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was like a. I mean, I don't know that much.
It's
I'm not.
the main thing about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought that was kind of like the main drive of the thing was to sneak, which I mean, I think it's a great thing, especially since we had a big conversation about this where, I think people were obsessed with like beating it just in a matter of days, and it's like you plop down the money. Why don't you take some time and get through the nooks and crannies of everything and try it out? I don't know why everybody's in such a hurry, but I don't know. As always, I digress. But yes, this has been the Diabolical Index for March 5th, 2018. I guess it'd be entry 3. Episode 5, entry 3. Because I do have those. I have to be difficult, right? So, I mean, I'm going to have like the non-entry episodes with the choose your own. Actually, yeah, speaking of choose your own adventure, I found a pretty cool one in my stuff. Runaway Spaceship. Check this out. Yeah, Runaway Spaceship with this gigantic Admiral Akbar looking dude on there.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. So, and oh my god, it's so funny. This is definitely original. This is not a reprint whatsoever. Because, oh my gosh. And some kid had made a big notation about which ones that he had. And I didn't know this, but I guess the first Choose Your Own Adventure from Bantam Skylark would have been the original one. It's called The Circus, so it's pretty simple, right? But those are fun. So if you want to do that one next week, let me know. If you want to keep going with the Hamlet story, because there's still tons of stuff to do with To Be or Not to Be. We barely even scratched the surface with Ophelia last week. I guess it was just last week. Man, I don't even know what time's passing so weirdly right now. Because
Also, that'd be fun.
What's that now?
Also, that'd be fun. That book.
Oh, this one, the Runaway Spaceship. Yeah, I might have to embellish a little bit because it's most definitely kid stuff. But I can do that. I'm good on the fly, making different things up. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, with the To Be or Not to Be. Maybe we'll mix it up. Maybe throw that in this time and then get back to Be or Not to Be in the next non-entry episode, because I'm kind of curious as to what. Because I would like to think that if you become King Hamlet the First, famously, he's dead. So like it makes me wonder that if you're just running around as a ghost the whole time. So we'll see what happens with that. As always, I'm Corey Dawson live from Paradox City Books and Games, Rising Sun, Indiana. And this has been the Diabolical Index. If I can speak right now, I'm so tired. But thanks for coming to see me.